The hearing will please come to order. Chairman Hamilton.
Mr. Chairman, I want to just express a word of apology to you and to the senators and to our witnesses, Mr. Colero and General Singlaub. Earlier this afternoon, we had a series of 6 or 7 votes in the House, and it was necessary for members of the House to be present for those votes, and so we had to miss a session, and I wanted to let you know and to extend our apologies to you for that. We'll proceed in order with Mr. Fasell on the questions to Mr. Colero.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, it's nice to see you again. We've been friends a long time. I can't remember how long exactly, but it seems to me it was when you were in jail we first got acquainted. No, we weren't cellmates, but I've been accused of being worse. I admire your cause and the efforts and the anti-Somoza efforts that you were involved in and the revolution in Nicaragua. I know you as an honorable person and as a true Nicaraguan patriot. But you understand what we're up here and why this committee is inquiring. I'm sure you do. It's a question of law and constitution, the operation of a democracy. And while it may not be the best for your cause, I know that you support everything this committee is doing in making the facts available to the American people and deciding what happened and what went wrong, if anything. Am I correct?
Right, sir.
Now, would you turn to an exhibit there, see if I can read this thing, APC 7. That's the famous chart that wound up in the Ollie North safe, Mr. Colero. And you see there, you got U.S. accounts on the left there, and it says they covered the waterfront. Got liberals, conservatives. Then it says multi-corporations, U.S. and overseas. You see that? You follow me across the top line. And then the other organization says overseas only. One of them says International Youth Committee, one box. And the other one I can't make out. I don't know whether it says Institute for Drugs or Institute for Democracy. And I'm not trying to be funny. I just can't make it out. Do you have any clue about either one of those? Because you'll notice that this is the financial management plot plan that Mr. North had. And you notice there's a line that runs from both International Youth Committee and that other organization down to FDN. Now, FDN is crossed out, and then he's got UNO, right?
Right.
Then below that, he's got, looks like to me, MDN and Robello. And the next one looks like Liberty Party, LIBPTY. And then, can you make out a name in the parentheses next to that? Does that mean anything to you?
Cruz.
Cruz.
Yeah, CRUZ.
Now, do you know anything about the International Youth Committee?
No, sir, and I don't know about the other one either. I mean, the only thing I can very clearly see is that my name doesn't appear, and it's got 2 other persons in it, and it says UNO, but...
Now, I understand, because they scratched out FDN. And the reason I ask that, because if you look up on your chart, you've accounted for all the money you got.
Yes, sir.
And the way I see it there is that on the sale, the money that came from the sale of arms to Iran, if you took all of the money below the 32 million, you don't have too much.
Not at all.
Now, Intel Cooperation Inc., you knew about them.
Yes, I knew about them, sir.
And you were able to account for that money, so that's separate. You take that out. So basically, as you testified earlier, you're talking about maybe $200,000 from Lake Resources.
Yeah, but
But you still don't know exactly where that money came from.
Congressman Brooks, I think, indicated that that Lake Resources money was received in October of 1985.
Right, it was before.
Before any of the connections with the arms sales.
So that means zero from Lake Resources, according to your accounting. Now, miscellaneous deposits, the 417, you're not sure where that came from yet.
Well, no, what I said is that there was money transferred to through our accounts for the radio 15th of September and political endeavors that were sort of on the side of the FDN. And there are others that I think could be internal transfers, but I will gladly take a look at them, and I'm sure I can define exactly what that is.
Now, as I remember your statements from the very beginning, Mr. Colero, when all of this information broke out, and as far as I know, you haven't changed your position.
No, sir.
With regard to, you made the statement that as far as you knew, you didn't receive, FDN did not receive any of that money, and you didn't receive any of that money.
Yes, sir.
That it might, we're talking now about the money from the sale of arms to Iran, that it might have, as I recall your testimony, or your statement, public statement, it might have been used with respect to air transport or other transport or drops. Am I stating you correctly?
That was the only alternative, because I did not know who was funding this private airlift or air resupply service that we were being given.
Now, did that air resupply service include, however, the supply of military equipment direct to troops?
Not to my knowledge, it did not, because we were supplying the weapons and ammunition from our own resources.
In other words, you had central control over the resupply or the supply of military materiel going to your own troops.
Yes, at our end.
Thank you very much. No further questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
Senator Nunn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, just a couple of brief questions. I think you answered a question this morning. Senator Cohen asked you about the purposes of the FDN, and you answered that it was to force the Sandinistas from office. Is that correct?
Yes, yes.
What was the military objective of the FDN?
Well, the military objective of the FDN is to conform a combined effort with political, diplomatic efforts that would permit the driving out of the Sandinistas, or the turning over of the Sandinistas, and the establishment...
The overthrow of the government, then?
Well, the establishment of a democratic government in Nicaragua.
Did you discuss the objectives, this objective, with Colonel North?
I do not remember, but I could have said that that was my purpose, that was the way I looked at things, and that was the way I felt.
Well, did Colonel North ever give you an indication of what his objective was, or what the objective of the U.S. government was in supporting the Contras and the FDN?
Well, to my recollection, I mean, it had changed over the time, first to interdict arms, then it was cut off, then we were given humanitarian aid that was to keep us alive, and finally we were given money both for lethal and non-lethal necessities.
Did you ever set up any kind of apparatus for the interdiction of arms in El Salvador?
Yes, we had troops. As a matter of fact, we did make raids in the resupply point in a place called La Pelota, or La Pelona Island, which was right off the coast of northwestern Nicaragua, and we did destroy and published this resupply point. We made another one in Cosihuina, which is in the Gulf of Fonseca.
Was that one of your main objectives?
Well, sir, it was, for us, it was accessory, I should say, and it was in line with our main objective.
It wasn't incompatible with your main objective?
No, it was coincidental.
It was not one of your main objectives?
It was coincidental. Well, at heart, you cannot being a Nicaraguan, I mean, you had to go a little further. I think you would understand that.
Right. Did you have conversations with President Reagan? You mentioned you met with him 3 times. Did you ever express to him what your objective was?
Well, the liberation of our country, but I do not remember saying what our objective was. I remember talking to him more as to what we were doing and our gratitude for his position, his permanent support of our effort.
Do you recall President Reagan ever expressing to you what his objective was or what the objective of the U.S. government was in assisting the Contras?
No, sir, we did not go into such detail.
Never did go into that detail.
No, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Broomfield?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, I'm sorry I wasn't here this afternoon to hear your testimony, so maybe some of the questions I might have for you you've already answered. First of all, I want to say we certainly appreciate very much your coming forward voluntarily to testify about what you know without demanding us giving you a grant of immunity. I also want to express my own personal appreciation and respect for your efforts to keep alive the hope for a free and democratic Nicaragua. It seems to me the strategic interest of the United States is really at stake, and I hope we will not lose sight of those interests as we probe the extensive details of this investigation. As for myself, I believe America would be making a grave mistake if it abandons the Nicaragua resistance once again by cutting off U.S. funding at the end of the current fiscal year. But let me ask you, Mr. Colero, from your unique vantage point, what will happen to the Contras and the cause for freedom in Nicaragua if the Congress of the United States does not continue to provide you aid for your ongoing struggle?
Well, the United States will lose faith with friend and foe, and as far as we are concerned, we will be left in an extremely difficult position, one of possible annihilation, and the Sandinistas will consolidate themselves, will launch the revolution without borders, which was their primary objective expressed right after the 1979 arrival of the Sandinista government, and you will have a permanent presence in mainland America of a Soviet base with the consequent dangers to all of the Americas, including the United States.
Certainly, if you don't have continued support from the Congress, you cannot depend on voluntary contributions to keep going.
Definitely not. It's, as you can see, it's been an on and off situation, and I believe that, that this country, as the arsenal of democracy, could share a little bit of that arsenal with us.
Mr. Colero, the United States is often referred to as, and indeed we like to think of itself as a lighthouse beaming in a bright light, symbolizing freedom and hope to the oppressed world. In short, a beacon of liberty. If that was so, would you say that to the people in Nicaragua yearning for freedom, the United States is now viewed more like a lighthouse whose beam is growing dimmer permanently, or a lighthouse temporarily encased in a fog banked of itself by doubt and self-examination? If it's the latter, what can we do short of voting more aid to ensure that the beam light shines brightly again for you and your oppressed brethren?
Well, I will, using your image of the lighthouse, I will say the lighthouse that goes on and off really represents a tremendous danger for ships because you can count on it and not count on it, and it's best not to count on something that is being shot on and off, and being put on and off. And I certainly think that that we will bring about conscience in this country to keep up the support of our effort, which is not only for us but for all of us.
Mr. Colero, I wasn't here, you probably have answered this question, but I think a key question in this investigation is, did you receive any aid from the so-called diversion of funds from the arms sales in Iran?
It is becoming more apparent every day that we didn't, and which is something that we have held right from the beginning. And, but nonetheless, we are in need of money. We have a debt of $1.9 million in the Central American region, which cannot be paid out of the $100 million because there was a prohibition set on paying back debts. But we had to incur in that debt in order to keep alive between the time of the end of the Nicaraguan Humanitarian Assistance Office, the humanitarian aid, and the beginning of the $100 million.
Well, Mr. Colero, I just want to commend you for your appearance here today, and thank you very much, and wish you continued luck.
Thank you, Mr. Broomfield.
Mr. Rodino.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, first of all, I understand that you have appeared voluntarily and haven't sought immunity. Have you discussed before coming here to testify with anybody other than your attorney, anybody in the federal government, the White House, the CIA, or et cetera, concerning this testimony that you're going to give?
Here, no, sir. I did tell Mr. Stokes that during the noon recess, I called an officer of the Central Intelligence Office saying that I was here, that I would like to see them after the hearing was over.
Why did you have to do that?
Why did I have to do that? After the hearing? Or why did I want to talk to him?
Why did you want to talk to the
Oh,
CIA?
I want to talk to them because there's a matter of a helicopter that's being held here and that we need for it to be gotten down to the area because it's going to serve for medical evacuation for our people. That was the primary objective.
Mr. Colero, when you were deposed, you stated with reference to the possibility of receiving money from foreign sources that this was told you believe, by Colonel North, and you also mentioned that General Secord referred to some substantial amounts that you were going to receive. Did Colonel North tell you where he received this information?
No, sir. At one point, I gave him an account, a bank account number.
Why did you give him the bank account number?
Because he requested it from me, and
Did he tell you for what? For
I
what
gave
purpose?
it to him. Well, he did not go into detail, but it was obvious that he would supply it to someone else who would
Did he
send the
tell you
money.
who that someone else was?
No, sir.
Did he tell you where he received the information, though, that a foreign source was going to provide you with money?
No, sir. No, sir.
You were very happy about the fact that you were going to receive this
Extremely happy,
money,
yes, sir. Yes.
and you didn't inquire about the source yourself?
No, sir. I mean, I was happy over receiving money, but really not much concern as to the source of it.
You mentioned the fact that you provided Colonel North with some $90,000 worth of traveler's checks. Is
Yes,
that
sir.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And you said that initially that he discussed the need to get some money for hostages, as you said.
Yes.
And I think you provided him, I think your statement was about $25,000.
Yeah,
first.
I believe that was the first installment.
Well, what about the other installments? What about the other $65,000?
Well,
Did he come to you asking you for more money?
They were given in subsequent meetings, and he told me that there was more needed.
Not
yeah.
for hostages.
Well, I understood it to be for the same purpose, or I do not remember exactly if he repeated every time that it was for, but that was my understanding.
And he never specified what the amount of money that he was looking for was needed for.
He never specified. Please phrase that again.
Didn't specify, didn't indicate why he needed the money specifically.
Well,
I mean, $25,000 is not a big sum of money, but to you, especially considering the amount of money that you needed because you were carrying on an activity which is important to you, and every dollar counted, I assume.
Yes. But at that time, we were comfortably well off in funds. And I remember saying to him that hostages, Nicaraguan hostages and American hostages were one and the
I know,
same.
but that was the first time, Mr. Colero.
Yes, yes.
But the subsequent times that he came for money, which is the balance of the 90,000, because my understanding is, unless I'm mistaken, you said $25,000 at first when he discussed the hostages, but in all, you computed that there was about 90,000 that you furnished him.
Yes.
Now, when specifically did he come back for that money?
Well, it was between March and June, I believe. March and July, March and June. At a time when we still had resources available.
And he never told you what the money was for, except that he needed a certain amount of money. Is that correct?
Well, no, it was for the hostages efforts, and then I discussed with him the possibility of my turning over money to some other resistance people, and then we concluded that it was not politically sound to do it. And at a later meeting, he told me that forget about that. It's going to be taken care of in another way. So, and then I suspected, I presume that would be.
I don't mean to be insistent, Mr. Colero, but I'm a little confused. You talk about the hostages. Was it all for hostages?
Well, I'm saying it was for hostages, and then I am opening up the possibility, on account of discussions with him, that it was also intended for other members of the resistance that would not appreciate a dependency on my organization, and that's what I said.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. McCollum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I wonder if I could ask the court reporter down front if he could move over a little bit. I can't have a direct view here. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Mr. Colero, there has been a lot of discussion over a period of time about the role of the CIA. Obviously, when we've been able to aid you legally, the CIA has been involved, and they've been an instrument to assist and carry out American policy, both before the Bolton Amendment and most recently since the Bolton Amendment's been removed. But there's been an implication through questioning today that somehow the FDN and the resistance movement in general of the Nicaraguan resistance has been a puppet of the CIA. And I've heard before many times some of my colleagues implying that in fact the whole creation of the resistance movement was a creation of our government and the CIA. You have responded intermittently today to that, but I don't think anybody's asked you that question, and I want to. Was the resistance force, the FDN, a creation of the CIA?
People don't die as puppets. People die for a cause, for something they believe in, and that's for what our people are fighting and dying. The Nicaraguan resistance grew out of the Sandinista repression. The Sandinistas continued their war after the overthrow of Somoza against what they call the bourgeoisie, against all of those people that had guts to stand up to their repression and to their demands, who wouldn't budge. And the first fighters of the Nicaraguan resistance were constituted by a group of former Sandinistas, former fighters of the Sandinistas, headed by Pedro Joaquin Gonzalez, and it constituted of 60 of those men. Many of them have died already. Some are still alive and commanding troops of ours. And then also some National Guardsmen went in. Then they both combined forces and began to attract thousands of Nicaraguan patriots who, many of them probably haven't even heard of the CIA.
CIA didn't start all of this, is what you're telling us, by any stretch of the imagination.
By any stretch of the imagination, no. I mean, we have received help, support from the United States government, and it is the United States government that chooses the agency through which that aid comes.
But you don't take orders from the CIA.
No, sir. No, sir.
Let me ask you another question, talking about the FDN just for a minute, which is the force that you represent and the primary force in the northern region. as I understand it. Roughly how many troops or people are there in the Army that you have, your resistance force
At
today?
the present time.
At the present time?
Yeah, well, the resistance forces have all united as of recently, and we are in the process of forming one national Nicaraguan army, and all told, at the present time, there could be over 14,000 fighters in the heart of the country, and some 4,000 in secluded areas and border areas.
Well, not talking about the leadership now, but just talking about all these fighters out there that are fighting for the resistance. Can you describe for us what they're like? I mean, what do they come from? Are they wealthy people? Are they former Somozan National Guardsmen? Who are they?
Well, there's, of these 18,000 people, less than 1% ever belong to the National Guard. The median age is about 18, 19 years old. That means that they were 12 and 11 during the Somoza dictatorship. They're peasants, they're small landowners, and they're professional people too. We have our own doctors who are young Nicaraguans who have graduated in Mexico and different places. We have doctors working for us that have license to practice in the United States, but they rather go and serve.
But the bulk of the fighting force are what we call campesinos or peasants, young people?
The bulk is campesinos, yes.
Well, now, of those young people that we're talking about and of the campesinos, the fighting force, haven't a number of them been injured by mines I've read about somewhere in the newspapers?
Well, we had 2 Americans go down recently, and they made molds for 61 prostheses for young Nicaraguans who had lost their
Do you need
limbs.
more? Do you need more of these artificial limbs?
Oh, we need a great deal more. Yes.
Where would somebody send a donation of artificial limbs? You got someplace that they could help you with that?
Yes, there's an American in Washington State, in Seattle, Washington, by the name of Chuck Lyford, who has done this similar type of work for the Salvadorians, and who is doing now something for us. Also an association in New Orleans headed by Dr. Alton Oxner is doing the same, but I don't have...
My time is virtually up, but I want to ask one last thing about the organization itself. Can you give us an idea, for example, of the leadership? For example, a lot of people think the Somozan Guardsmen are all the leaders. I know Enrique Bermudez has had that background, but a number of them have been around. It seems to me the other day I met somebody who was a former president of the University of Central America from Managua who had been part of the resistance and inside of the Sandinistas at one time. Is that correct?
That's correct, sir. In the lecture, we come from all walks of life, professionals. Some were anti-Somoza. The immense majority were anti-Somoza of the leadership. There were some that were professional soldiers like Enrique Bermudez. But, Somoza used to call everyone who opposed him communist. And now the Sandinistas are called everyone who opposed them Somocistas. I mean, it's just a derogatory term, that's all.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Boland.
Mr. Colero, when did you begin providing Colonel North with written reports on the quantities of the arms you were purchasing and at what price?
I gave him a couple of reports, I guess, written. One of them that I remember very clearly, which is part of this exhibit. And then once in a while I would send him an inventory of what we had, so he would keep abreast of what was going on and what we had.
So you were apparently providing some of these written reports sometime during late 1984 and perhaps through 1985?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And at whose direction were these reports prepared?
Well, these were papers. The one that I gave him, that is here, I wrote myself, and then there were other papers, inventories that I would be supplied with. I would take a photocopy of, and I would send to him.
Well, were you instructed to make these reports by a particular individual?
No, sir.
You were not.
I thought that it was. I used to keep Colonel North abreast of what was going on, and I had no reservation as to which information I would give him.
And whether or not General Secord assisted in any way in the preparation of those reports, General Secord?
Not in the one that I wrote, and not in the inventories that I supplied, so I do not think that I received any help from General Secord.
Were you able to negotiate on the price of arms with General Secord, or did he merely tell you what you owed for the quantities that you wanted?
He did the negotiation, and to my knowledge, he was giving us the best price available. And as I said before, I remember buying from the Far East 7.6251 ammunition, that's NATO type ammunition, for $75 a thousand, and I knew that to be a tremendous price because I had seen invoice prices of materials supplied to us by the U.S. government before, and that same ammunition had been priced at about 16 cents a piece. So I figured those were good, half of what we had been paying.
Well, so in effect, you were able to negotiate with General Secord on the price of whatever you were purchasing?
I would say yes.
Did you negotiate on the price with McCoy and Martin and with General Singlaub?
Yes, I negotiated these purchases, and the prices at General Singlaub, by the time I bought from General Singlaub, I was very much acquainted with price of weapons and ammunition because I would get offers from all over, from people who wanted to sell to us.
Well, in any event, you were able to negotiate with them if you didn't like the price. If you did not like the price, you were able
I could. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. In that sense, I was not forced or obliged by anyone to buy from anyone in particular.
All right. You testified that you had knowledge of the fundraising operations run by Spitz Channel and Richard Miller. Did you know what inducements both Channel and Miller made to get donors to make contributions?
What?
Did they offer any inducements to them?
Amusement.
No, inducements.
Inducements.
We would introduce you to particular people, or we would show you around this town, or that sort of thing.
No, sir, I don't know about that. All I did for that endeavor was to address these gatherings of a dozen or 15 or 20 potential donors and tell them of what we were doing, tell them of our needs, and, make what you call a sales pitch for...
Yeah, but who asked you to make the sales pitch?
Mr. Channel or Mr. Miller.
And did Channel or Miller tell you what United States government personnel were assisting in their fundraising efforts?
No, but I knew that Colonel North would give briefings to these people, and I was present at a briefing Colonel North gave to a number of House members in one of the House buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Colero. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. DeWine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Colero, first let me thank you for your testimony today. I found it to be very candid and very open. One of the principal criticisms that I hear about the Democratic Resistance Forces is that you have really not been able to articulate a vision of the future for the people of Nicaragua. What life would be like if you were in power. As you know, in any guerrilla movement, it is not only the military victories, but it is the support of the people. And I wonder if you could comment on that for me and tell me what really is your vision of the future for Nicaragua if you were able to take power.
Yes, we have signed, the last document we signed, we call the Charter of Democratic Commitment. And in general lines, what we want for Nicaragua is freedom, is a democratic form of government, separation of powers, a very limited armed force to keep order. We don't need to have great armies. Expenditures in health, in education, and we want to turn to the agro. We want to turn to the rural areas of Nicaragua and develop the agriculture in Nicaragua, because we are an agricultural country. Most of our people live in rural areas. We have to bring education, we have to bring health, but most of all, what we have to give to Nicaraguans is freedom, the right to elect in free and honest elections the people that they want to be led by. We have to bring honesty, we have to bring to Nicaragua the opportunity of progress for our people, and most of all, to live in peace, because only through democracy can there be peace in Nicaragua.
Mr. Colero, you were put in jail by Somoza. You've experienced life both under the Sandinistas and under Somoza. I wonder if you could share with us your feeling as far as whether or not there is more oppression today in Nicaragua or less oppression. What is the situation in regard to freedom of the press, freedom of religion, the availability of food for the people? How do those compare? Is life better today? You know, a lot of people say, well, maybe the Sandinistas aren't so great, maybe they don't do everything right, but life is better for the people there.
Sir, that is an absolute falsehood. If there was poverty under Somoza, there is misery today. If there was lack of freedom under Somoza, there is repression today. If
freedom of press, freedom of religion?
Freedoms in all the sense of the word. Really, the bad that Somoza had has been multiplied many times by what is happening today in Nicaragua. Nicaragua, I mean, during the Somoza time, it made the papers if someone was exiled. Now, when close to 500,000 Nicaraguans have become refugees in neighboring countries and here in the United States, I mean, that never happened before. It's really, there's no comparison. Although the Somoza dictatorship I wouldn't justify the Somoza dictatorship because this one is worse.
Let me finally switch to one other area, and I know you've testified several different times today about your meeting with the President of the United States, but I have several specific questions. I just hope you'll bear with me and go through this because I want to clarify this and make sure there's no misunderstanding. Did the President of the United States ever tell you that he would instruct the people that were working for him to find loopholes in the Boland Amendment?
No, sir.
Did the President ever say to you that he was instructing the CIA to continue to give the freedom fighters assistance, notwithstanding the Boland Amendment?
Absolutely not.
Did the President ever have a discussion with you where he told you that he had contacted a head of state of another country to provide aid for the Nicaraguan freedom fighters?
No, sir.
And finally, did the President ever tell you he was aware of the diversion of funds from the sale of arms to Iran to the freedom fighters?
No, sir. Absolutely not.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have two or three very short questions. I want to go back to the $90,000 just a moment in traveler's checks. Why didn't you just give the $90,000 at one time, since you had plenty of money at that particular time?
Well, because it was not requested of me. I only gave what was requested, and I believe what was requested the first time was maybe $15,000 or $25,000.
And so on several subsequent visits, Colonel North would ask for another $10,000 or another $20,000?
Yes, sir.
And you continued to supply him with traveler's checks?
Yes, from March to about June or so, July.
Did he ever return any unused traveler's checks to?
No, sir. No, sir.
You indicated that, so far as you know, and the evidence tends to indicate that, none of the Iran money was ever used as far as your operation was concerned.
Yes, sir.
Are you aware whether or not any of it was used in the Southern Front or with any other Contra leaders?
No, sir. What I have identified, or that I thought that could have come from the Iran money, was the air supply operation.
As soon as Mr. Secord came into the operation, he told you that he was helping raise some $15 or $20 million from foreign sources.
Yes, sir, he said that.
And at that time, he also indicated that he would be able to supply all of your arms needs.
No, he did. No, we weren't told that. No, arms needs.
As far as purchases. He encouraged you to purchase from him, didn't he?
Well, that was right at the beginning. Yeah, in 1984. Yes. That he could help us in supplying us with weapons and ammunition. Yes.
And you made all of your purchases from him, except that through General Singlaub.
And some that I had made previous from Gretsch World. Yes.
And as soon as you made the purchase from General Singlaub, Colonel North and Mr. Secord did not go through your operation anymore, but handled the situation directly, didn't they, as far as purchases?
Well, yes, there was talk about that it was coincidental, but actually we didn't have any more money to purchase any more weapons, and then the only money we got was from Intel Co-op, and which was not enough, and to buy weapons, and we had other necessities that we had to fill.
If after that time, after the General Singlaub purchase, if Mr. Secord purchased $10 to $20 million worth of supplies and weapons, did you see any of them?
No, sir.
Do you know of any other forces of other Contra leaders that might have received from General Secord after that General Singlaub purchase?
Well, there has been talk of the Southern Front receiving some things, but we were given things for the Southern Front. And I was not aware of what was in a warehouse in a place that I did not visit. But my understanding was that what was being supplied was from our stocks, but I have no way of knowing if there was an additional stock.
During any of this time, did Mr. Secord indicate to you that he was going to give up his profit on these arms and share the profits with the Contras?
No, my understanding right from the beginning was that he was not making a profit. That's the way I took it to be. And it was until this hearing that I heard about the 20% markup, and that he said that he hadn't taken any of the profit.
Did you ever meet Mr. Hakim?
No, sir.
Don't know anything about him?
No, sir.
Since no one's contacted you, either Mr. Secord or anybody else, about giving you $6 or $8 million since these hearings started, have they?
I've heard of the intention, and we're ready for it.
Thank you.
Mr. Colero, just one question from me. Can you assure us that none of this money, directly or indirectly, came to your personal benefit?
Yes, sir.
None of it did come to your benefit?
None of it did come to my personal benefit, no, sir.
We've appreciated very much your testimony, Mr. Colero. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Colero, in behalf of the Joint Committee, I thank you very much for joining us this day and subjecting yourself to this intensive questioning. You've been great help to all of us. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, the Joint Committee will meet to receive testimony from a panel of 3 witnesses, Mrs. Garwood, Mr. O'Boyle, Mr. Coors, and at 2 p.m. in the afternoon, we will resume our questioning of General Singlaub. I'd like to remind the members of the Senate Select Committee that we will meet immediately after this session.
Could I read something before I leave, sir? No, it's not a poem.
It's not a poem. Please do so.
It's more than a poem, I would say. And these are excerpts of a letter. And it says, after 4 years of fighting one of the world's great superpowers, our only victory has been